It started with the basket, just one, left by the window, round and ordinary, with sides warped slightly from years of use. Morning poured through the glass, filling it with a puddle of warmth the color of honey. It had been forgotten after a too long evening, the kind of night where the sky closes early and dishes stay in the sink. Forgotten like the rest of the just finished chores. Still damp towels hanging from the doorframe. A half-sorted pile of socks lost in the hallway rug. May didn't remember leaving it there. Neither did her grandfather. But the next morning, there she was, a cat, curled as though she'd grown from the plastic itself. One paw draped over the lip of the basket, eyes shuttered against the world. Her fur caught the light in pale gold streaks. Her ears twitched once, and then stilled. The cat didn't wake when May stepped closer, didn't stir when her grandfather, barefoot and bleary, whispered, "Well, look at that." She wasn't theirs. Of that, May was sure. She'd never seen her around the street before, and theirs was not the kind of house cats wandered into by mistake. Even the neighbors, when asked, just shook their heads and peered over the fence. No collar? Nope, odd. And that was that. But the cat returned the next day, only when the basket was empty. May tried placing it far from the window. She tried filling it with clean clothes, luring the cat inside with food, even setting out soft blankets on the couch. None of it worked. Only the empty basket, bathed in morning light, seemed to call her back. It happened again and again, until it was no longer a surprise. The basket became a fixture, quiet altar to something unspoken. She never meowed, never rubbed against legs or nosed her way into laps. She came only to sleep, always alone, always in the basket. So they gave her a name, Whisper, because even her footsteps made no sound, and because the house had been quiet for such a long time before she came. The house sat on the edge of a sleepy neighborhood, not quite in town, not quite far enough to be rural. It was white-bricked, 2 stories tall but modest, with tiny square windows and a porch that creaked whenever the wind changed moods. Long grass grew wild at the edges of the yard, tangling with the fences as if reaching for something forgotten. May had lived there since she was 9, after the car crash turned her world into echoes. Her grandfather, Caleb, kept the place steady, with quiet hands and slower words. He had a voice like worn corduroys, soft, textured, reliable. Everyone in the town called him Mr. Caleb, whether they remembered his last name or not. May was 14 now. She moved like a shadow in her own home, thoughtful and quiet, with limbs growing faster than her sense of direction. She loved to draw faces mostly, or windows waiting to be opened. She'd sit for hours by the back window, legs tucked up under her, sketching silhouettes as the sky changed colors around her. Every week, she helped her grandfather wash the towels and pillowcases, folding warm fabric together in neat, forgiving stacks. It was in these small, routine silences that they made room for each other. No need for chatter. They folded memories alongside fabric. Then Whisper came. The first few arrivals felt like coincidence. A cat in a basket, a quiet thing in a quiet house. It made a strange sort of sense. But patterns emerged. She never came unless the basket was clean and empty. Fill it with clothes and she'd stay away. Place something soft beside it, in it, near at hand, she was gone. For a time, they thought maybe she liked the smell of detergent or the warmth from the radiator. Maybe the basket reminded her of something. But it was more than that. Once May left a scarf tucked into the basket, light, barely noticeable. Whisper didn't show up that day, or the next. When May finally shook out the scarf and left the basket bare again, the cat reappeared, quiet and curled, as if she'd never left. Her grandfather watched this with growing interest, sipping tea by the front window, nodding as though the rhythm made sense only to him. "She knows something," he murmured once, "something older than us." May asked what kind of something. He only smiled, half lopsided. "Some cats carry stories across their backs, like a saddle. You just have to know how to look." Whisper refused to sleep anywhere else. Not the furniture, not the porch swing, not May's old blankets. Only the basket, and only when it waited, empty, sunlit, and still. May's grandfather began to make little superstitions around her. "Don't step over the basket on a Tuesday," he'd say. Or, "If Whisper flicks her tail twice, the mail will be late." He delivered these lines like weather forecasts, half amusement, half belief. One evening, May tried to lift Whisper from the basket to set a load of folded sheets beneath her. She regretted it instantly. Whisper didn't hiss or scratch. She simply slipped from May's arms like smoke and disappeared through the hallway. For 2 days, the house was void and unsettling. The basket stayed empty, and the shadows felt heavier in the corners. But on the third morning, there she was, curled up against forehead resting on the rim, tail twitching in slow harmony with her breath. After that, May never disturbed her again. There were rules now, unspoken but absolute. The basket had to remain clean. It had to remain empty. It had to be set by the window, where the sun came first in the morning. Whisper's presence was a kind of pact, and in return, she gave them silence, draped in meaning. Their visitors noticed the cat, of course. She'll ever go outside, only to disappear. She friendly. She's something, May would say. Eventually, the clean basket in the window stopped being a curiosity. It became part of the house, like the old grandfather clock in the hall or the chipped teacup Caleb refused to throw away. A daily ritual, a soft offering to something wordless. "I think she's one of those in-between creatures," Caleb said one morning, looping twine through the end of a tomato vine. "In between what? Waking, dreaming, losing, finding." May watched Whisper. From the window, her gold-touched fur caught in a swirl of sunlight. The basket cradled her like an old friend in a house full of things that had been taken too soon. Whisper came only when something was empty, but never stayed long enough to take anything with her. This, May thought, is a kind of grace. Winter came quiet that year, like someone closing a door very gently, hoping not to wake anyone. Frost crept fingers across the windowsills, and the trees wore their stillness like shawls. May pulled her sleeves over her hands, catching snowflakes before they melted on her palms. Whisper hadn't been by. In 3 days, then 5, then 12. May stood by the window every morning, eyes scanning the yard before the sky had even finished brightening. The basket remained stubbornly empty, as if sulking, as if waiting to dot. She called, softly at first, then louder. She walked the blocks of the neighborhood with her hood drawn tight, peering into alleys and carports, murmuring Whisper's name as though it might grow wings and find her. But the only answer was wind. It was May's grandfather who told her to stop searching. "Some things can't be chased, honey," he said, sipping tea with both hands wrapped around the mug like he needed to be held by it. "Whisper'll come back when the air says she can." May didn't fully understand what that meant, but she stopped calling. She just kept setting the basket out every morning, wiping it down, adjusting it slightly so the sun would hit it just right across the bottom. A soft alcove of waiting dot, and then, on a Tuesday, the snow finally began to melt, only a little. Just the corners of the lawn, where shadows had lost their grip. May opened the curtains before sunrise and gasped there. Cradled inside the basket like no time had passed was Whisper. Her breath puffed in slow clouds. Her fur was brushed with dew. She didn't lift her head, just twitched her ear once and tucked her paw beneath her chin. May didn't say a word, only reached her hand toward the glass. Relief bloomed inside her like a soft ache in the weeks that followed. Life settled back into its rhythm, save for one difference. May became the one in the basket. Illness came on like fog light at first, then thick and full. She felt tired all the time, cold, heavy. By the time her grandfather noticed, she could hardly speak above a whisper herself. Doctors came and went. Tests, more tests, but no names were offered. May spent her days on the faded couch, under the good blanket, drowsing in half light. Caleb kept tea warm, the fire warmer, and Whisper she stayed. Every day, she curled in the empty basket which Caleb placed near May's head, just beside the couch. She did not leave, not for food, not for doors cracking open, not for shifts in light, only slept, coiled in perfect stillness. Her purring was low, resonant, the kind of sound that rooted into walls. Comfort that didn't need to be seen to be. Believed, the doctors marveled. Whatever had taken hold of, May began to lift. Slowly, yes, but steadily. Her fever broke like thawed ice. Slow drips, until breath became easier. They had no name to put on it, only theories, shrugs, suggestions of rest and good luck. But May knew, and so did her grandfather. When May could sit up again, she lay a hand on the edge of the basket. Whisper didn't stir, but May thought just maybe her purring changed direction, like a song glancing toward its final chord. Whisper stayed one more night, then, as quietly as she had returned, she was gone, a hollow in the basket marking where she had been, and where she might return. Nothing else had changed, except everything had. May heard the screen door creak long before her eyes recognized what had gone still. It was August, the kind of heat that made the porch boards sweat and the tomatoes burst if you weren't quick with the picking. Her grandfather had gone out. After breakfast, pencil behind his ear, crossword folded beneath one arm. They'd spoken lightly over toast. Peaches in syrup, 2 cups of tea. And now, when she stepped outside to call him in for lunch, the world stopped. There he was, slumped gently into the porch chair, arms resting in his lap like they'd simply forgotten to move. His eyes closed, not in pain, not in tension, just closed. One hand still held the pencil, quiet and poised. May stood frozen, the screen door trembling behind her. The sound of the wind faded, replaced by a silence that pressed, like snow before a storm. The basket was already there, Whisper inside it, curled with her back to the world, tail tucked tight, as if she'd witnessed all of it tore made peace with what no one saw begin. But May hadn't put the basket there that morning. It had been inside the living room, still beneath the window, waiting. She remembered that clearly. She remembered wiping it down, just like always. But the basket sat outside now, not 2 feet from her grandfather, empty when it arrived, full now only of presence. She couldn't make sense of the timing. May stepped to his side. She reached for his hand, still warm but unmoving. The pencil slipped gently from his fingers, coming to rest on the porch like something given back. She didn't cry. Not then. She sat beside him for a long time, knees pulled up to her chest, chin tucked forward. Against them, the wind stirred the pages of the abandoned crossword, flipping it open. The answers peeked out like children from a game of hide and seek. Just before sunset, Whisper stirred. She lifted her head with a wakefulness that felt older than the twilight. Her eyes met May's, not wide, not questioning, just looking, like a door half open. Then she meowed. Once, a long, dolorous sound, thin but not weak. The kind of sound that found its way through screens and window panes. A note that tasted like memory and endings and maybe mercy. May swallowed. Her throat burned. She reached out, touched the side of the basket with trembling fingers. Whisper lowered her head again, closed her eyes once more, and May, finally, let her tears come. They weren't loud, they didn't need to be. Inside, the clock ticked. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain-soaked leaves and the sun's last warmth. Later, when neighbors asked how it happened, May said the only truth she had. It was time. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lit the stove, made tea, even though it tasted of ash, folded a few towels, crocheted something terribly crooked. At some point past midnight, she noticed the basket was empty again. Whisper had left, not far but not in sight. The porch held only the echo of footsteps and something more silent. May didn't follow. She turned off the lights, sat in her grandfather's empty chair, and waited for the sun. The morning after the funeral, May watered the garden. It didn't feel like grief, but it didn't feel like not grieving either. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that tiptoed in and never left. The basket had been moved back to the window though. Whisper hadn't come home yet. May didn't check for her, not directly. She only passed by the window a little too slowly, poured the tea a little too close to the glass. But the basket stayed empty. Beside it, the air hummed with the shape of memories not yet spoken aloud. May washed the bedding, not because it needed it, just to do something. The towels smelled like cedar and ghost stories. Her hands moved without asking what for. Time softened, blurred, as though the edges had been left out in the rain. Days slid beneath her. The sun returned to its usual places. In this new life of rearranged echoes, some things simply remained. The basket, for one. Whisper, did return. It was nearly dusk, the light syrupy and low, when May looked up from her drawing and found the basket full again. Whisper didn't look older, but something in her had shifted. Her stillness was heavier, like a bookmark placed at a sorrowful chapter. May sat nearby, not reaching, not speaking. The house didn't feel whole, but it didn't feel lost. Not entirely. The seasons began to turn tree by tree, leaf by leaf by leaf. By May returned to school, came home, folded laundry, cooked simple meals with her grandfather's old spoon. She played his music on the record player, cello suites, slow and wide. Whisper slept, always in the basket. May bought a new one when cracks spread up the sides of the old. Whisper didn't object. She sniffed it once, circled twice, settled in it. It wasn't about the material, it was about the waiting. May began to think of the basket like a bell, silent, but chiming inwardly, calling only to those who needed it. Visitors asked about the cat. May never explained. There were other cats in town, chatty ones, Alice-lick ones, cats with claws and collars and soft purring names, but none came to the house. None seemed interested, only Whisper kept returning, never nuzzling, never begging, just arriving when emptiness needed company. May grew taller, her hair got longer. She filled in around sorrow's edge. One day, she caught herself smiling at something on the radio. A joke, nothing important, but the sound of her own laughter startled her. Whisper lifted her head from the basket, blinked once, then put it back. Down, the sun reached deeper into the window that day. May began keeping a second basket in the back room. Also empty, also clean. She didn't know why, only that it felt right, as though someone she hadn't met yet might need it. Perhaps not right away, but someday, because in a house that has known absence, you learn to leave space not just for what was lost, but for what might yet return. The leaves came early that year, red and wide, like laughter after silence. May was 24, and the house no longer felt too big when the breezes came through. She managed the animal shelter now, part-time, still coming home to folded towels, and the scent of old books in the sun. She kept the baskets by the windows, just in case. Most days, Whisper still came, her fur gone silver in places, her steps more deliberate. Her naps grew longer, her purring softer, but she was still there, like a breath, like a promise someone kept on your behalf. May came home one morning after her shift to find the gate unlatched. At the far edge of the fence stood a boyno, more than 6, maybe 7. His coat hung uneven on his shoulders, one sleeve shorter than the other, and he held a suitcase held together with string. Rust-colored hair curled at his temple. He didn't flinch when she approached. "Are you lost?" May asked, voice gentle. With use, the boy looked up, brows lowered in something too patient for his age. "I'm where the basket cat lives," he said. Then, as if that explained everything, he stepped past her into the yard and walked straight toward the porch without asking. May followed, uneasy and curious. He sat down softly beside the basket by the front door, the one Whisper always circled at sunset. May crouched beside him. "What's your name, Eli?" he replied, staring into the empty basket. "My sister. Used to talk about the basket cat. Said she helps people who've been taken apart." May blinked. Taken apart. Eli shrugged, but something in his face stilled. May made him warm bread with butter. Asked few questions. Listened more. He'd run from a foster home. Didn't say why. Said nothing needed to be wrong sometimes. For you to look for something different. May nodded like she understood. Because she did. She called the proper numbers. Left messages. Gave names. But that night, she made up the guest bed, left a glass of water on the nightstand, and placed a clean, empty laundry basket beside it, warmed just slightly by the heat vent below. Whisper didn't need coaxing. She was there before the boy had brushed his teeth, curled tight in the basket, positioned toward the bed, not the window. May stood in the doorway for a long while, watched Eli sleep, the lines on his face slackening like threads being unknotted. Whisper didn't look up. Her tail flicked once, a simple answer to a question not voiced. The next morning, the social worker came, a soft-spoken woman with too many papers and not enough answers. Eli sat quietly through the visit, eyes trailing the corners of the ceiling. He didn't protest when she asked if he wanted to stay a while with May. He only looked at the basket, then nodded. Whisper stayed each night, never leaving the guest room. She became a kind of ornament, a steady flicker in the corner of dreams. May didn't ask questions. The boy wasn't ready to answer. She just folded clothes for a boy who folded his. Pain quietly, and Whisper slept tonight by the bed, tomorrow by the door, until Eli began laughing at the radio, until he asked for thicker socks, until he said, "I think the cat likes me." May only smiled. She only stays where she's needed. It happened in spring, one of those early days when the frost finally gave up and the soil softened enough to remember what warmth felt like. The curtains moved with the breeze. The floor held the hush of morning. May was in the kitchen, cutting strawberries, humming a song she didn't know the name of. She only noticed the silence when it thickened. No padding paw steps. No basket creak. Eli wasn't awake yet. The stove ticked as it cooled. She went to the window first. The basket was there, empty. Then to the guest room, still made. Then the hallway, the stairwell, the porch, and finally the living room. Whisper lay on the rug beside her basket as though she'd fallen from the edge of it, or perhaps stepped out one last time. She wasn't curled. Her eyes were closed, but not in sleep. Four limbs stretched before her, tail soft against the floor. No breath, no sound. May knelt beside her. The basket was spotless, waiting. Whisper had never not chosen it before. May didn't cry. She only sat very still, watching the place Whisper had lain, and the place where she hacked in single quotes. Eli came downstairs barefoot, rubbing his eyes. He stopped when he saw. The quiet grew larger. He didn't speak, just moved to May's side and took her hand without asking. They buried her beneath the wind chimes, next to the mint growing along the porch step. May wrapped her in an old towel Whisper had once sniffed and walked away from, placed her gently in a box lined with cedar, and on top carved a small figure with careful hands. A laundry basket shaped from river stone. No words, no ceremony, just wind and blossoms and the sound of breath. That night, no one set out a basket, but both May and Eli felt the space where it should have been. The next morning, when May went to open the curtains, the sunlight poured in. UNPROMPTED. No tail flickered, no presence stirred. She reached for the basket out of habit, then paused, left it exactly where it was. Eli said nothing the whole day until evening, when he looked out at the garden and whispered, "I think she left it empty for the next one." May stared at him. She opened her mouth, but found nothing to add. That night, she lit the porch light and left the door ajar for an hour. Not because someone was coming, but because someone had been, and for the first time in years, as the wind curled its fingers beneath the eaves, the quiet in the house sounded like peace, not absence. Some silences are carved by loss, but some are left gently, like space in a basket for whatever comes next. The house changed quietly, not all at once, and not in obvious ways, but like a riverbank softens with time, reshaped more by wind than storm. May still lived there. Eli Tootler now, with eyes that met her level and a laugh that came often, and stayed long. The basket stayed, though it hadn't been touched in weeks. It gathered light the way Whisper once had, warmed by morning, sweetened by memory. Sometimes May dusted it off, ran her fingers along the rim, not quite looking for fur, not quite expecting it, but hoping all the same. She kept 2 baskets now, one at the front window, one on the porch by the mint, both empty, both clean, not because they needed to be, because they deserved to be. Eli sometimes asked her why they kept them. May would pause, folding underwear with practiced grace, For the same reason we keep pictures of people we love, she'd answer. Not because they're coming back, but because they were real. The baskets didn't beckon anymore. They just waited. Once in a while, a cat might linger on the porch, strays with wary eyes, or tabbies too proud to stop walking. They sniffed the rails, watched the windows, but none stepped in. None curled up in the basket, and that, perhaps, was right. Whisper had been a particular kind of guest, one who came not for shelter, but for shape. That was the word May thought of when she dreamed of her shape, like the shape of silence beside someone sleeping, like the shape of pause between heartbeats now. Life filled the house with newer sounds, the boiling kettle, the hum of Eli's guitar, the clack of game pieces moved over a story only they knew how to finish. Sometimes May would sit near the door, sketch in hand, pencil wandering, the empty basket beside her. And in those moments, with the air just still enough, the sun just golden enough, she swore she caught it. A shift in shadow, a twitch at the corner of her eye. The briefest tug of thread between now and then. She never turned to look, never called out, because what had passed wasn't something to chase. It was something to welcome. If it chose to return, she only whispered, like her name, soft and sure, "You're always welcome." And whether or not the basket was filled again didn't matter, because it had held something once, and that once was everything.